As we, oh, and I can take my mask off up here. That's good. Thank you. How's everybody's energy level? You've been listening for quite a while, so while I wake up the computer, one of the things that we do at the Trauma Ed Center while this is waking up, let's see how. It is. Is it a different chord? Oh. There we are. Thanks. Okay. One of the things that we like to do is we call them brain breaks. Anybody familiar with brain breaks? Yes. Okay. You ready? Do you need a brain break? Okay. Let's do one. So, brain breaks help our right and our left side of the brain kind of reconnect and talk to each other once again. So one of our fun ones that we like to do, and we do them with everybody, so this isn't just for your young students, this goes for everybody because everybody's got a brain. It doesn't matter how old you are, right? So being silly is half the fun, and that's why I love presenting to educators because you guys get into it. So what you're going to do is you are on a deadline to build a house, and it's got to be done. So you need to be sawing because you got to get the wood done. Let me see. Are you getting your wood done? Get all the sawing going. But at the same time, you need to be hammering. How's it going? Come on. You got to saw and hammer at the same time. I don't know. Some of y'all's. Okay, now switch. So saw and hammer. How's it going? Good job. Thank you for engaging me in a brain break. If anybody wants any other brain breaks, and you can do these, the recommendation is every 20 minutes of focused attention, you do a brain break. If anybody wants easy Google, reach out to me. I'll send you lists and lists of brain breaks. You guys, I do it with my grad students because, you know, I do it with myself. Sometimes you just got to refocus. So, Ingrid Slickers, I am here from across the road from our International Center for Trauma Education and Care. So literally that is what we are. We are here to help support and educate on trauma, and so that's our title. Why is everybody talking about trauma? But first I want to do a check-in. I just gave you a brain break. So with your fingers, hold up which dog you're feeling like at the moment. Let me see some fingers. Which one are you feeling like? I'm seeing some 5s, some 1s. I'm watching out for the 7s. If you see any 7s, make sure, oh, we got, maybe some 7s. We got a poke up here. Okay, where are our energy excited ones? And I encourage you, so we do check-ins, and I'm sure you've heard about the importance of doing check-ins with your students. We do this because then we can lean on each other. So I was looking at, okay, who's tired that we might need a support or nudge a little, right? Who's got the energy, who's gonna keep us focused? Because we're in community, and so we check in. Before I go further, we always start with a trigger alert, because anytime that we're talking about trauma, we know that we've all been affected by it, right? And so here we are, you've been in a week full of meetings almost thinking about your students, but as we talk right now, there also might be some things that may impact you personally, so I always have to give you a trigger alert. But let's start out with the Israelites. Were the Israelites a traumatized people? What were they traumatized? What happened to them?
Become slaves.
So historical, intergenerational, 400 years of slavery. I mean, we don't even know all the details of the hardships, right? What else had occurred right before Moses came? Loss of culture, all of that. Baby boys, and I apologize today because I'm cruising through this topic, so you know that we could spend a lot of time. Their baby boys had been murdered in front of them, right? So talk about a traumatized people. So God comes, right? He's gonna rescue them. Well, Moses comes through God's direction. And we see in chapter 6 of Exodus, this is right after the very first time that Moses went to Pharaoh and said, let my people go. And what did Pharaoh do? He said, nope, and he took the straw away. Okay, so talk about under-resourced population. Do y'all ever feel like maybe your straw's been taken away? Right? And the people are just like, no, never mind. And so Moses, like he always does, turns to God. And he says, God, what are we going to do? In chapter 6, here's how my Bible actually names that chapter. It says, God promises deliverance. So all the way to verse 9, God is saying, redemption, land of milk and honey, right? We know the message. But then we get to verse 9, where Moses, like he always does, right, gets the message from God, turns to talk to the people. Moses spoke thus to the people of Israel, but they could not listen because of their broken spirit, discouragement, and harsh slavery. And other translations use other words. So these were people that were in such despair, they could not even hear the message of redemption. And for those of us in the serving field, teachers, preachers, how many of the people that we're working with are in such despair that they can't even listen? Trauma, psychological or emotional trauma, is damage or injury to the mind after living through extremely frightening, distressing events. And we may see results in challenges in functioning or coping after the event. Other definitions of trauma, and again, we have full trainings on what trauma is, so I'm kind of cruising through this. Trauma overwhelms the central nervous system. It alters the way we respond to things. It can be traumatic or life-threatening event, deeply distressing. But I draw your attention to the top one when you go through, see, or learn about an event. Did you see that? Go through, see, or learn. Oh, I usually grab my phone at this point. How many of our kids have phones? Think about 2 summers ago. How many of our kids watched George Floyd die in front of them? Right? So trauma is widespread. And, you know, maybe for many generations we thought, well, you know, it's not in our church. It's in our church. It's everywhere. Another perspective of trauma. So nobody argues about the big T traumas. Nobody argues there's war in Ukraine. Are those families and those children going through trauma? Nobody questions that one. Sexual abuse, crime. But many times we don't pause and acknowledge that there's big, deep, significant impact that happens with what we call the little T traumas. We see more impact on a developing brain from emotional abuse, basically a child being told that they're stupid or they don't amount to much. We see even more impact on a developing brain from a child who basically is ignored than actually a child who's beaten, because a child that's being ignored is getting no attention. So neglect, losses, bullying, repeated criticisms, and sadly, even spiritual trauma. And again, we could spend a lot of time kind of pulling these apart. But the reason I'm bringing them up is because we've got to acknowledge that it's here. It's in our schools. It's in our kids. So let me tell you a story. You all like Sabbath walks. Who likes Sabbath walks? All right, so let's go for a Sabbath walk. Here's our path. We set off. It's so fun. And we're walking along and we're hearing the birds. And oh, we just love going on a Sabbath walk. And all of a sudden one of you says, hey, like the birds have stopped singing. Yeah, it's kind of quiet. And then we hear the crick of a stick. And we're like, well, wait, we're all together. Must be a squirrel or something. We keep going. Then we hear another crick of a stick. And as we go up that little edge, here's what we see. What you gonna do? Oh, mace. She's got mace. She's a Pathfinder. No, I don't know. We're the Pathfinders. Pathfinders, save us. Fight, flight, freeze. Yes, the stress response kicks in, right? Is your brain going to go into the thinking and say, now what kind of grizzly is that? Well, wait, we're in Michigan, like a grizzly shouldn't be in Michigan. So I wonder, are you going to be even, you're not getting that far, right? No. When we talk about the triune brain, you are in the reptilian part of the brain, which we call the survival brain. God made us in an amazing way to keep us safe. We need to respond. How are we going to respond? Fight, flight, freeze. There's actually 2 more now when we talk about crisis response. So who's going to fight the bear? Anybody? I don't know. I wouldn't encourage it. All right, let's not fight it. We may flight. We may flee. Maybe since it's all of us, if we start running, that's where those jokes come in. Don't be the slowest one, right? So we might flee. We might freeze, not know what to do. Okay, the 2 additional ones now that we are talking about in the field, and you may see this in your students, is fawn and flock. So fawn, literally think of a baby fawn submitting. So we're not saying freezing. It's more of a, I'm just going to submit and give in because this grizzly's going to eat me. There's nothing I can do about it. Okay? And then flock. Flock is one that we've studied in the field. We've seen with refugee groups that literally flock together. We've seen it sometimes, sadly, at school shootings when you flock together. And if this was all of us on this walk, some of us may flock and grab onto each other. Okay? But in that moment, it's hard to know what we're going to each do because that survival brain kicks in. So what I want you to think about is, we get back, let's say it was here, we went for a walk, we get back, and we're all like, phew, can you believe it? Yeah, well, so-and-so, and we did this, and so-and-so yelled at the bear and saved us, and whew, we're all calmed down. What happened to our bodies? Whew, adrenaline went up. I mean, sometimes I use this illustration with driving into work and when a deer cuts in front of you, right? Right? Again, you don't think about, is that a whitetail or was that, no. You just do whatever. And the moment's done, your adrenaline comes down, right? Your cortisol levels come down. But for many of our kids, what if that grizzly is actually in their house every day? Right. Or that grizzly's in their church or in their neighborhood. Or it's been part of their genetics. We know that intergenerational trauma goes into the 3rd and the 4th generation. Science tells us that. We've known that. So what I want you to do, real quick, is I want everybody to take a piece of paper. And on your piece of paper, we're going to do an activity to hopefully wake you up just a little bit. I think there's enough for everybody behind you. Here's some stacks. Oh, thank you for helping. Here's some other stacks. Okay, so on a piece of paper, if you have your pen or pencil, your teachers, I want you to draw as big as you can, filling your paper, a brain. Mine always looks like E.T., but... So draw a brain. Doesn't have to be beautiful. It's just for an example, for an exercise. A brain. You're going to draw a brain. Don't make it overly fancy. Try to fill up as much of the paper as you can. All right. So once you've drawn your brain, I want you to fold it into 4s. Well, not, yeah. So it's like this. Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to mention to me, we just did a super quick definition of trauma, and what might that look like? Tell me some trauma that maybe some of your kiddos might have experienced in your schools.
It's not my dad. I know that there have been a number of children in my class that, well, let's talk about a brother and a sister. Their father abused them physically and sexually.
Okay, so.
The father's in jail now, mom divorced him, but
Okay,
yeah.
Well, and even divorce. We know divorce is very traumatic. So tear a piece of paper out. Okay, well, you had something.
We had some students at school I came from who were refugees from their countries. They've been raped.
So refugee stuff. So now we're talking big T's. Remember our list, big T traumas? Can anybody think of any little T traumas?
Well, I'm new to my school, so I'm not saying but I know that like within our administrative system, if we have parents who are really strict, the spiritual abuse.
Spiritual abuse, yeah. Like you're not valuable to God, or God's not gonna love you if, yeah.
Following the 10 Commandments well enough, or
Yeah, then God doesn't answer your prayers. Yeah, sure.
High grades expectations from parents.
Okay, all right, let's do one more. And for the sake of time, how do you think this kiddo's doing in your classroom? Oh, Jeremy did, I'm not sure. I guess I wasn't clear where to tear the paper. Sorry, I'm picking on Jeremy. It was along the folded edge. How's the kiddo doing in your classroom? So for many, many years, you all, we didn't know what trauma did to the brain. You remember we used to call it shell shock when the soldiers came back and there were no outside wounds, right? But we knew something was going on. Something was happening, but we could not see the brain until brain imaging started coming out. So this is a brain image. The brain on the left is a healthy brain. Red means activity. Black means no activity. The brain on the right is a child who suffered from extreme emotional neglect.
wow.
So nobody hit this child. This is emotional neglect. Do you see a difference in these brains? So how do you think the kiddo on the left is responding to math versus the kiddo on the right?
Wow.
And how about the plan of salvation? Remember we talked about the Israelites being in such despair? How do you think the kiddo on the left is able to process that information versus the kiddo on the right? Now what you see in the kiddo on the right is the back part, so the limbic system is more lit up. That's the emotional center, and again, we could train you for hours on what that looks like, where you're gonna have more the responses that are either the shutdown responses or the huge responses, because that child is functioning more out of the limbic system. Do we have brain scans on all our kids?
No.
Do we have brain scans on each other?
No.
We don't know what we've gone through.
Wow.
So when these scans started to come out in the field, it was early in my career, there was this sense of, what do? We can't go back. Can we see activity in the brain again? And praise the Lord, we can. There's ways. And so today we can't train you on all of that. That's why we've got a center. We've got a K-12 education director that's right here, Charity Garcia, wave. So as you're starting on your process, know that we're here to support you because we can train you on ways that we can see that brain show activity again, God-given ways. And yes, as you see there, when the brain is flooded with cortisol. So cortisol is our stress response. It's a good thing. God made us that way. So remember when we were running away from the grizzly? Then we were back and we were safe. But if you're always at that heightened level of survival and that cortisol is constantly there, it starts to impact your brain. We've actually seen with children who struggle with levels of cortisol, it actually impacts the physical growth of their brain. ACE, I don't know how many of you are familiar with ACE. In your resource, good, I'm seeing some nodding. In your resource sheets, there's, that you'll be given, there's a little bit of information on ACE. But I want to just expand on the ACE a little bit. It's the adverse childhood experiences. And I want to draw your attention to what we have called the 3 realms. So not only do we have the household realm of adverse childhood experiences, but we've got the community piece where we're seeing the impact of poverty, food scarcity, lack of jobs, discrimination. I mean, you see it there, right? Violence. And then in the 3rd area, the environment, you've got the pandemic, right? Has affected our kids. And so adverse childhood experiences are all around us, and it's on us to help negate the impact of that, and we can do that. So how deep is the mud? Depends on who you ask. Because sometimes when we present on this, when Charity and I present on this, people will say, well, I had it rough when I was a kid. But not every kid goes through it the same way, right? So for that little dog who's absolutely drowning in the mud, the resources are different than that big dog. And we need to remember that, not just with our kids, but with each other. And guess what? And even with the parents that we're working with. Okay, so it's been a few minutes. I need to give you an exercise to challenge your brain. You ready? Okay, here's your challenge. I'm going to show you a short video clip that's going to be about 1.5 minutes long. It's going to have soothing music and a pretty beach scene. So I'm going to give you your ultimate learning experience. You're in a safe, comfortable setting. I'm going to play nice music. You're going to have the beach in front of you, and this is what I want you to do. You're going to start by doing your multiplication tables, go up to 5. So remember this because I'm going to change the slide, so I'm testing you in your short-term memory. Then recite the Pledge of Allegiance to yourself. Continue with multiplication tables up to 9. If you get to 9, like if you're a quick one, then recite the 23rd Psalm. Okay? All right. Let's do this. Get yourself in a comfortable position. Here we go. How far did you get in your multiplication tables? 5. Did you get your Pledge of Allegiance? Anybody get all the way to the end? 23rd Psalm? Why not? I gave you enough time. What? What happened?
No, when you changed the music, I lost it.
When you change the music, she loves it.
But it was still music. I promised you a safe environment with music.
You didn't keep your promise.
It was still music. What changed?
The music was scary.
Who told you that music is scary?
My mom reacted to it.
Okay, so this is called painful past learning. Somewhere in your past, that music is scary. Anybody feel it in their body? Like you, and you looked up? I always joke. I used to play the Sharks, the Jaws music, but this generation doesn't quite get it, so it doesn't have the same impact, right? Because then what happened? People are like looking for sharks, and I'm like, you're supposed to be reciting your 23rd Psalm.
Wow. Ooh, that was a message.
Okay? And so for many of our kids throughout the day, that can happen. And it was nothing you asked for, it just came up. You weren't able to focus when the music changed. You were still in the same location, looking at the same scene. Basically, I triggered you. I gave you a trigger warning though, so I warned you. Okay, then how hard was it to come back and to focus? Because somewhere, painful past learning. Yeah. So what do we do? Whew, this is like the quick Cliff Notes version of now what? Components of trauma-informed care. What can we do in our schools? Well, this is just a real quick 3 main pillars. We create a safe environment. We support and teach emotional regulation, and we build relationships and connectedness. And each of these are trainings in and of themselves as to what we can do. But that's to come in your future. So let's start with creating a safe environment. So again, early in the field, I got the privilege of being sent away to get trained in what's called the Sanctuary Model of Care. It's a trauma-informed model. By the way, I didn't really introduce myself. I was in the field as a child and family therapist for a very long time before I came to Andrews to teach. Anyway, nothing to do with our Old Testament sanctuary. It was totally about being a trauma-informed community. But the beauty is that it so emulated our Old Testament sanctuary, because basically the bottom line is that instead of asking someone or a child, what's wrong with you? We ask, what's happened to you? And we need to be real. How many times have we looked at a child, we all do it, and thought, what is wrong with that kid? Or maybe it's, what is wrong with that parent? Or you have a coworker that walks in and you're just, what is wrong with, right? But it's shifting the perspective. And isn't that what God did with us? We started with the children of Israel, right? The people could not hear the message, so God said, I am going to come dwell in the middle of their mess. He could have set that sanctuary out, way out in who knows where at the end of camp. Nope. He came to the middle of the camp, the middle of the mess. And isn't it God who looks at us? He doesn't say, Ingrid, what's wrong with you? He says, what's happened to you? Right? And then he moves us into, and what's right with you through his power and glory. We also support and teach emotional regulation, the stress response system. So we talked briefly about those cortisol levels, right? How many of our kiddos walk into school already elevated? Maybe there's been fighting at home. Maybe even getting in the car has been stressful, right? They're already in that stress response system. We need to work on ways to get them into their rest, restore, rest, digest system. How many of your kiddos, maybe you're hearing, have digestion problems? It may be because their little bodies are never getting to the rest, digest, which is getting into our parasympathetic nervous system. So how do we do that? One of the ways we do it is by breathing, and you've heard about breathing. Y'all, that's God's first gift to us. When he made Adam, he breathed into Adam. So maybe you start your morning with some breaths. There's some ideas that 6 breaths and our 7th breath can kick us into the rest restore system. Anybody heard those numbers before?
Well,
Pretty cool. So one of the things we do, we teach various methods. I quite often just have kids go like this. So go ahead and do it. Just simply doing that for a moment just helps you do some deep breathing, right? It's real quick, helps the brain connect. Our most favorite one is pizza breathing. Some of you may have experienced it. Nicole knows it for sure. You've seen us do pizza breathing, right? We're gonna smell the pizza. You're gonna imagine your most favorite pizza. If it's gluten-free, rice flour, whatever. Pineapple and green olives, I don't know, broccoli, artichokes, right? And it's good, it's at lunchtime, I got you. You're gonna smell the pizza, but it's too hot. So you're gonna blow. Out breath must be longer to kick in the parasympathetic nervous system. So create a community where you use pizza breathing. So at schools, I often tell the stories, we teach kids. I can see a kid across a playground that's looking a little bit dysregulated, and all I have to do is do this, and they've got it. And these guys joke because they've heard me say it. I've had kids see me cruising down a hallway looking a little scattered and do it to me. But that's great, right? Because we're a community and we have a gift from God that helps us move into that parasympathetic nervous system, which then allows our wise owl to come back. Because if we're in our limbic safety, we have a barking dog. So these are some of the tools and tips that we love to teach kids. We can teach you more of. We have a barking dog that's there to keep us safe. So the dog, oh, I don't know. That's not on my computer. So, oh, I just see it in the back. Okay, we're good. The barking dog is saying, danger, 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 danger. When the dog barks, the wise owl flies away because we need to stay safe. But we need to find ways to calm that dog down so that that wise owl can come back and help us make good decisions so that thinking part of the brain can come back online. Here's one more tool. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve of the body. Starts at the back of the cranium, goes all the way to the pelvic floor. It is the nerve that's responsible for moving us into that rest restore system. One of the best things we can do is to sing loudly. So maybe your mornings with your kids need to be singing loudly. So you know all those years that we did the who can be the loudest side with Praise Ye the Lord? We were on to something, you guys, because science is showing that works. It kicks in that parasympathetic nervous system. We also teach kids to hum a song. So if they're feeling dysregulated and it isn't appropriate to be singing at the top of your lungs at that moment, you could hum, It's the vibration. You kick in that you kick in the vagus nerve, which then helps kick in the parasympathetic nervous system. We also know that singing together helps with the emotional connection with each other, which also helps to stimulate that brain. We talked about the importance of connection. That was our third pillar. Relationships matter. It's the most important fundamental thing about mental health. People, not programs, change people. It's you guys. We've got on there trust-based relational intervention model. It is a model that we do have at our Trauma Ed Center that we can share with you, but that's what the model is based on, completely on relationships, because that's what it's about. Real quick, because my time is wandering. Importance of relationships. So, superintendents, close your ears. No. I know that you have all kinds of curriculum things and other things that you need to meet. The most important thing, and you know this, is that relationship with the child. So they did a scientific experiment. They took monkeys. I apologize for those of you that love monkeys. When they used to do scientific experiments with monkeys, they put a monkey in a cage and wanted to test cortisol levels, blood pressure levels. They put the monkey in the cage and they traumatized it. They beat the cage. They played loud music, lights, you know, the whole bit, right? did the blood work after. As you can well imagine, those levels were sky high, cortisol sky high. Then they duplicated the experiment, different monkey, but this time they put 2 monkeys together in the cage, and they did it. And this time, those cortisol levels were reduced by half, simply because that monkey was not alone. And many times people say, sometimes I don't even know what to say to a kid who's struggling. Be there. It's the power of presence. It's the power of presence. Of course, we are all asked to do hard work, and none of us are perfect. God is still working on us, but remember, as we do this hard work, we cannot pour out if we're empty. So make sure you're being filled by the Holy Spirit, but that you're leaning on each other, because just like that monkey needed someone else, each of you, even if you're in your own little school, need others. So create community and relationships. Can't do it by yourself. We can't do it by ourselves. Prayer is powerful. Science shows it. I won't get into all the science. Gratitude is powerful. Science shows we can see activity. Remember that brain? We can see activity with being grateful. And so we encourage, maybe you start your morning at school and end your day with something they're grateful for in the last 24 hours. Science shows it. Interestingly enough, science says we need 3 things a day. Do you remember Daniel? What did he do? He prayed 3 times a day, but if you look at the verse, it said he gave thanks 3 times a day. Scripture tells us, and we've got it. So things we can do. This is hard work. My time is up, but I have to tell you this. So when Jesus came to get Lazarus out, it was his job to do the resurrection part. But what many of us forget is that when Lazarus came out, Jesus said to people, to humans, go unbind him. Okay? Do you think that was nice work? Do you think it was messy work? Think about those grave clothes. He'd been in there for about 4 days. I'm thinking that was kind of yuck, right? I'm thinking it was kind of stinky. And sometimes we're called to do the hard, stinky, kids can be stinky too, right? Literally. Work. But he asks us to do it. And so that's what we're responding to. So this is the verse that we have at our center, because there is so much hard stuff around. May God fill you completely. As I'm done, I do just want to draw your attention to some resources that we put in there. Know that there's mental health training for educators on Adventist Learning Communities that we helped to collaborate with, Charity. So this has tips and tools and all kinds of very concrete things that you can access. The North American Division Toolkit. I also want you to know that the NAD Youth Department has a lot of tools on there as well. As does Health Ministries. These are some videos, and these are all, you can connect to these on our website. These are some videos that we helped them. So for example, the breathing one, we talk all about pizza breathing. You're welcome to use those with your kids. They're like 3-minute videos. Now they're more for adults, but you can use them to have a conversation. My time is up. We just look forward to continued relationships with you. May the Lord bless every single moment you have with those precious children. Thank you.